to make a profit at the expense of the American people and as a distraction from the chaos and cruelty that he is sowing every single day. It's a classic authoritarianism, using the tools of government to enrich himself, reward his friends, and punish his enemies. So I'm asking my colleague, what kind of threat does this blatant corruption pose to our democracy, our institutions, and the American people?
If the senator from Hawaii will repeat the last sentence of her question, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. So the rampant corruption of this regime. So, what kind of threat does this blatant corruption pose to our democracy, our institutions, and the American people?
Thank you so much for the question. And when I hear that word corruption, and I admit I'm starting to feel a little dazed after these many hours on the floor. My head goes first to the financial corruption of the president, but there's all these other forms of corruption he's engaged in terms of corrupting the basic balance, separation of powers and the checks and balances. But let me speak first to the financial corruption. One thing that we have seen is that he's using the presidency to enrich himself and his companies and his family. And the most blatant example of this is when he said, I have this product that I want people to buy, and I'm going to hold a competition, and the people who buy the most of this product, a crypto coin, will be invited to a very special dinner at my golf club where I will be present and you'll have access to me. So he sold access to the presidency to the people who bought the most of his crypto coins. And in that case, it was a meme coin. And that means basically the coin is a collectible. It basically has no value. But then he engaged in another form of crypto corruption, and that involved saying, we're going to have a stable coin, and a stable coin means you give me $1 and I give you a crypto token that you can use in international transactions. And then there was a transaction involving I hope I still have this right, the United Arab Emirates. And they basically bought several $billion of these coins. And what happens then is the president can hold those dollars until the coins are redeemed and benefit from the interest earned on those several $billion. And meanwhile, there was a desire by the foreign government to get access to highly capable AI chips. And the answer was no, we're not doing that. But then after they bought all these coins and enriched the president of the United States, well, then the president said, let's give them the coins, or let's give them these advanced chips. So very much certainly the smoke, and I'd say even the flame of selling access and favors out of the presidency, now to the tune of having made billions of dollars in the roughly 9 months that he's been in office. I would be happy to yield for another question if you were talking about a different type of corruption. Okay. I yield. Oh, no, I don't yield yet because I have to do this protocol right. I see my colleague from New Hampshire is on the floor, and I would welcome a question if you have one.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Yes, I will yield.
I'm normally your seatmate, but I thought it might be easier if we talk this way. So I am down here in a different place than I usually am to ask a question. But I want you to know how much I and all of your colleagues appreciate your standing up for democracy. Because we are in a pivotal moment, as you've said, not just in this country, but globally. And I know that you care about not just what's happening domestically in the United States, but you also care about what's happening in the world, because you and I serve on the Foreign Relations Committee together. And I just came from a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who shared that Europeans are now spending more on defense than the United States for the first time since President Eisenhower. And they are working together to strengthen sanctions against Putin and his bloodthirsty gangs who are wreaking havoc on Ukraine and Europe. And I have some good news that I wanted to share with you from the Foreign Relations Committee this morning, since you weren't able to be with us. And it applies to what's happening in Ukraine and Europe. Because this morning, in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the committee considered 3 bipartisan bills to address Russia's continued expanding aggression for the first time in this Congress. So the first time since the beginning of the year, we have actually taken action in the Foreign Relations Committee, action that you supported with your proxy votes, and I appreciate that, to take action against Russia's aggression in Ukraine. One bill will designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism because of what they've done to kidnap Ukrainian children. One will stop Chinese entities from supporting Russia's brutal war machine against Ukraine. And the final one will authorize a continued quarterly transfer of Russia's foreign assets that have been seized in the United States to support Ukraine. So I think all of these bills passed, they were bipartisan, they passed unanimously out of the committee. And I think it's a critical time in history for this Congress to be taking a stand on Ukraine. So, Senator Merkeley, given this important moment in history, what more can we do in the Senate to support our allies and to protect the Ukrainians from further bloodshed from Vladimir Putin?
I so much appreciate the good report and question from my colleague from New Hampshire, and appreciate her leadership on the Foreign Relations Committee as the top Democrat, working hard to partner across the aisle for the common cause of international security. And every time I think about Ukraine, I think about how fiercely, including the Orange Revolution, in which they did so much to say, no, we will not be taken over by Russia. We will not be put under the thumb of Russia by one of our presidents. They have said, we see the system to our north where there is no freedom, where people are not in charge of their own destiny because they are ruled by a dictator, and we reject that and will fight with our lives. And so many have, in fact, perished on the battlefield to defend our freedom. That inspires me every time I think about it. And at the moments in which President Trump has been less supportive of Ukraine and more supportive of Russia, I have tried to send him magical vibes. No, understand the difference between standing with a nation fighting for freedom and snuggling up with a dictator. We are a light to the world when we fight for democracy and support democracy. So I'm really pleased to hear about these 3 bills passing. And I hope that other factors can be worked out in the international community that will help slow down the Russian war machine. They are an incredibly large country, and they have built huge factories to produce cruise missiles. And so nightly, Ukraine is hammered with hundreds now. And so it just means more resolve by the United States, more resolve by Europe. I am surprised to hear that the Europeans collectively are spending more on defense than the U.S. I am like, if that had been a trivia question, I would have failed, but there it is. And that certainly has been partly to recognize the threat from Russia. If Russia is willing to slice off a piece of Georgia, as they were in 2008, I believe, if they're willing to throw thousands of soldiers into a fight in Ukraine, really with no consideration, I mean, it's just like fodder to the war machine. And then we're seeing that they're overflying some of the other European countries. And these are incredibly provocative. So I think all of that goes towards hopefully forging a unity of purpose between Europe and the United States. Something you may not know, one of the skeletons in my closet is I spent a rotation working at NATO in Brussels when we were trying to develop a treaty for intermediate range missiles because of the nuclear threat, to stabilize the threat. It's the middle of the 1980s. And the United States and Europe worked so closely together. That is the type of partnership. It's the type of partnership that has taken some hits in the last few years. We want to restore that vision of that careful, detailed, determined coordination so that we advance the best strategies. And of course, battlefield strategies are also changing dramatically as we go, being able to adjust to this changing world. So that's my hope, that building on the work that the committee did today, and hopefully those bills will be here on the floor, hopefully they'll be on the President's desk, that we can continue to strive to a peaceful conclusion with security for Ukraine and not allow the war machine of Russia to overwhelm it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nobody else? Well, Mr. President, for the first time in several hours, I don't have a colleague who's asking me a question, and so I'm going to return to the conversation that I was holding forth on regarding the Department of Justice. And I have here this page called Justice Connection, Urgent Message from Recent Department of Justice Alumni Decrying Attacks on the Justice Department. I believe I asked unanimous consent to have this put in the record, but if I did not, I'm asking it now.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And here is how that reads. We are 282 former career employees who proudly served our country at the Department of Justice. From prosecutors, special agents, and intelligence analysts to immigration judges, grant managers, civil rights attorneys, and more, we all carried out our duties faithfully, regardless of who occupied the White House, until we no longer could. Left the department, either voluntarily or involuntarily, because of actions taken by this administration. Our fidelity to the Constitution and our dedication to our country did not end when our jobs did. Now that we left the department, we believe it's our duty to sound the alarm about this administration's degradation of DOJ's vital work and its assault on the public servants who do it. It is incumbent on all of us to fight for the Justice Department before it's too late. DOJ's mission is to, quote, uphold the rule of law, to keep our country safe, and to protect civil rights. And it's failing on all three fronts. The Justice Department cannot uphold the rule of law when it carries out the President's retribution campaign and protects his allies, violates court orders, evades due process requirements, directs attorneys to violate their ethical responsibilities, and fires its employees without notice or cause in violation of civil service laws. It also cannot keep our country safe when it ousts FBI employees, prosecutors, national security experts, and ATF officials, shutters offices that prevent community violence, and dismantle drug trafficking operations, purges the attorneys who enforce the laws that protect the environment, and shifts highly trained special agents away from counterintelligence and counterterrorism. And it cannot protect civil rights when it drives out 75% of the attorneys from the Civil Rights Division and refuses to enforce the nation's civil rights laws as Congress intended, using them instead as a cudgel against marginalized groups. The administration is taking a sledgehammer to other long-standing work the department has done to protect communities and the rule of law. Its plans to eliminate the tax division, which saves the country billions of dollars by pursuing tax evaders, will lead us poorer. Gutting the public integrity section and FBI public corruption squads has paved the way for government graft. Canceling hundreds of millions of dollars in grants has left at-risk communities less protected and crime victims less supported. The list could go on. As for its treatment of its employees, the current leadership's behavior has been appalling. This administration lies about the deep state and exaggerates about government inefficiency, and exaggerations about government efficiency have eroded the respect our country once held for public servants. And demonizing, firing, demoting, involuntarily transferring, and directing employees to violate their ethics duties has already caused an exodus of over 5,000 of us, draining the department of priceless institutional knowledge and expertise, and impairing its historical success in recruiting top talent. We may feel the effects of this for generations. The Justice Department's backbone has always been its career workforce, and those who were part of it are best positioned to explain why the current leader's actions are catastrophic for the nation. We call on these leaders to reverse course, to remember the oath we all took to uphold the Constitution, and adhere to the legal guardrails and institutional norms on which our justice system relies. We call on our fellow alumni to join us in sounding the alarm and in mobilizing to support our colleagues still there. They deserve respect and gratitude. Neither of which they're getting from the administration. We call on Congress to exercise its oversight responsibilities far more vigorously. Members in both chambers and on both sides of the aisle must provide a meaningful check on the abuses we are witnessing. And we call on all Americans whose safety, prosperity, and rights depend on a strong Department of Justice to speak out against its destruction. Our democracy is only as strong as the rule of law, and the rule of law can't survive without the principal institution that enforces it. Well, that's a powerful letter from these 282 former career employees of the Department of Justice. I was very struck about the phrase that says, we call on Congress to exercise its oversight responsibilities. That came up about an hour ago in one of the conversations, that we could do so much more, and we should try to be partnering with our Republican colleagues to provide that essential function of oversight. That's one of the checks and balances, and we should be deeply engaged in making it as effective as possible. Because here is quite a list of the things going wrong in the Department of Justice. These things beg for hearings to be held, for issues to be understood, for the press to be able to report, for solutions to be able to be found, for lines that prevent unacceptable conduct to be clearly delineated. But that can't happen unless Congress exercises its oversight ability. Do we have one more chapter? Okay. We have chapter 8. So we are headed back to the book. And the book is this book, How Democracies Die. And with each chapter, I'm trying to give some sense of the chapter, though not every element of it. So I'll read some of the pages, maybe scan through some others, and try to address a few of the issues that